right, here's a lick that I really love. This is another 2-5-1 in the key of G major, but this time it is over ornithology. And there's some really interesting note choices going on over this, particularly over the 5 chord. And it's actually a little technique that I've noticed him use over multiple different 2-5-1 licks in this video. So once I explain what's happening on this, you're probably going to see this pop up on at least a couple of other licks in this same video. So this one is starting with the 2 chord A minor 7, and it actually starts in the same position as the previous lick, so up in the 7th position. And now this one, we start on the and of 1, and we put our middle finger on D sharp, and we do a hammer on to E with our ring finger. Then we hit G and B. So if we look at these notes in relation to A minor, these top 3 notes, E, G, and B, that's the 5th, the flatted 7th, and the 9th. And all he's doing for that starting note is he's doing a chromatic approach into that 5th by going from a half step below on the D sharp. All right, and then we have a little chromatic D, D flat, C, just chromatic from the 4 down to the flatted 3rd, very common. And then we hit the E, G, and B again. And it carries over a little bit into the D7 chord. So this E note happens on the and of 4. Then when we hit the D7 chord, we're playing the G and B first. So this instance, it almost seems like the opposite of what was happening on the previous lick. The previous lick, he was thinking the 5 chord early over the 2 chord. This one, it looks like he's letting the 2 chord kind of carry over into the 5 chord for a couple of notes. So up to there so far, we have this. Okay, now the next part, to me, this is really the most unique sound of the entire lick. So we're on the D7 chord, and we take this B note, we move down a half step to B flat, and he does this quick slur, B flat, hammer on to D flat with your pinky, pull back off to B flat, then middle finger plays G flat, and then ring finger plays E flat. So if we look at those 5 notes, you notice it's an E flat minor 7 arpeggio. Now this is a really interesting thing because the way that I would explain what he's doing right here is, in my opinion, I think he's doing something that's very similar to the altered scale, but it's slightly different. So what I mean by that is typically when we're taught to play over the altered scale, a lot of times the way people are taught it is that you take whatever your dominant chord is, in this case D7, you go up a half step and think melodic minor, right? That gives you like a D altered scale. Now to me, what it looks like he's doing over this is he's taking that same idea, but rather than playing the E flat melodic minor scale, he's playing E flat Dorian. So it gives us one note that's slightly different, right? Which is that D flat. Because a D flat note against a D7, that's like the major 7th, which is not a typical note that you see outlined in this sort of context. So you might see it in a chromatic setting, but in terms of like outlining it with an arpeggio like this, I wouldn't say this is as commonly used as the altered scale. So in my opinion, I think what he's doing is he's just taking whatever dominant chord he's playing over, he's going up a half step and thinking Dorian, and it gives you most of the notes that are, you know, similar to the altered scale, but it also gives you a major 7th over the D7 chord, which is really interesting. So then at the very end of that arpeggio, I go down to a C note with my middle finger. So he's doing like an E flat minor 7 on the top, and then at the end he's hitting the 6th. So it's almost like a combination of an E flat minor 7 and E flat minor 6, which is really cool. And then the fingering is kind of specific here. You'll see why when you see where it goes after this. So after I land my middle finger on that C note, then my pointer finger jumps up to A flat on the 1st string. This is the flatted 5th of the D7 chord. Then I go back to the C again. So back to the C, which is the flatted 7th. And then when we resolve to the G major, he just goes. So he hits an A note on beat 1, that's the 9, and then G and B together, a 2-note dyad, which is the root in the flatted 3rd. So the whole lick would sound like this. All right, so a quick review of everything we talked about. We start with a little chromatic from the sharp 4 up to the 5th, and we play an arpeggio off of the 5th with E, G, and B, which gives us the 5th, the flatted 7th, and the 9th. Then we do a little chromatic from the 4th down to the flatted 3rd. Then we hit that E, G, B arpeggio again. And then over the D7 chord, he's doing an E flat minor 7 arpeggio with the 6 on the bottom, which gives us this interesting combination of notes that have a lot of similarities to the altered scale, but also introduce a major 7th interval against the dominant chord. And then over the 1 chord, he basically just does the 9, and then he hits the root and the 3rd as a 2-note grouping. All right, so a lot of cool information within that lick. That is lick number 2. Now on to lick number 3.